I'd like to welcome all of our ISM New Jersey members and all of our members from other chapters to our event for today, and also any of our guests that are joining us today. Please be sure to use the chat or the Q&A function for any questions you might have for our speaker today. Now on to our program, because that's why we're all here. Our speaker for today is Molly Louthan, who will be speaking on suppliers are from Mars, customers are from Venus, solving issues with relationship 360s. I love this title. Molly is the CEO of Vericlude, I'm sorry if I mispronounced it, a technology company that improves operational efficiency between customers and suppliers. She previously was managing director for a global procurement consulting firm where she designed and implemented supplier management strategies for the Fortune 500. She has seen countless issues across industries due to the lack of trust, transparency, and technology needed to support company-to-company relationships. Molly has been a past speaker for us last year, and I'd like to welcome her back to this program for today. Take it away, Molly.
Thank you so much, Kathy, for having me back. I really appreciate it. And thank you for the introduction. And thank you to everybody that's joined on the call and taken time out of their busy schedule to learn a little bit about what a Relationship 360 is. In the past, you all have heard me talk, if you've joined before, about trends in supplier relationship management, done research around that, not only here in the US, but also globally, to take a look at what's working, what's not working, and what organizations are currently doing. I am passionate about supplier relationship management. I've stood up multiple programs, either from scratch. I've also been brought in to do improvement around supplier management programs that already exist. But no matter what the industry is, I have seen time and time again similar issues and problems around customer to supplier relationships. And one of the things that I have seen as a tool to help in these relationships is a Relationship 360. So today I'm going to go through what is a Relationship 360, why do it, how to do it, and some examples of what they might look like in your organization. So my company is called Vericlude. It is from the Latin, that means truth and inclusion, and I made up my own word for it. But to me, those are the two things that are so needed in relationship management. And I think what we've seen, especially over the last year, is that the tools and technology and process that we have for managing relationships between companies hasn't really been properly invested in. We've invested in tools internally, but we haven't figured out how to actually build something and manage relationships with one another in a centralized fashion. So what is a 360? So most of you have probably participated in a 360 internally as an HR type of survey. What do I think of my boss or my teammates? And what do they think of me? The idea is that 360 is two-way feedback so that you get a full picture of what's going on in a specific relationship. Same idea used within HR as a tool can actually be used within your customer and supplier relationships. The questions and the content are going to be different, but that aspect of feedback that is two-way, that is what's key in making something a 360 versus just one-way feedback. And 360s are really helpful when you are looking to improve a specific relationship. So I know all of you probably really appreciated the title. Suppliers are from Mars, customers are from Venus. So that idea that customers and suppliers have different pain points in the relationship. They have different things that they might complain about on each other. But what I've seen time and time again is that the symptoms that are causing problems of these two different groups tend to be the same. So when we have a buyer that says, the supplier is constantly pitching us innovations that are just not aligned with what we are looking for. And a supplier might be really worn out on pitching new innovations that never actually get implemented, but they're constantly being asked for. And one of the key things that I have seen is that the symptom behind this is that there actually isn't a clear definition of what is needed for innovation. So whether that is a definition for your company, or even a definition within that specific relationship, because something that might be considered innovation in one area might be considered continuous improvement, or might not be something that is worthwhile at all. So upfront, being able to understand these two pain points from either side, and having that centralized problem to solve, which is, what do we mean by innovation? And let's get clear on that up front. Another one that we see pretty often is that a buyer says supplier is struggling to hit deadlines, and supplier says some of these buyers are constantly changing what it is that they need up until the last minute. And what we tend to see as a symptom there is that the planning and forecasting process is just not clear. It's done differently, person to person. And because planning and forecasting is so heavily reliant on people, we are all trying to fix it with technology, but in the end, any planning and forecasting tech that you have still is going to be relying on people to make that decision, look at that information. So getting really clear on what people need to do within that planning and forecasting, and what's a standard process that you can each go by. Another one that I hear is buyers are looking to reduce costs, and customers are already feeling the pain of that account not being as profitable. So one of the symptoms that we could see is the way and the products that are being ordered could be specialty or rush orders that are costing both sides money. So there could be something within there that, once again, the symptom might be the same, but the way that the buyer and the supplier might see it will be from two different sides. So it's really about trying to figure out, how do we understand what the generalized underlying symptoms that we're facing in these relationships, so that we can actually drive improvement. And one of the number one reasons that we see for contract failure, and this is a survey from suppliers, is around unclear expectations. So time and time again, this is where relationships fail. This is where personal relationships fail, and this is where company to company relationships fail, is your expectations are not clear and they're not aligned. So that is one of the top things to be able to figure out and work through. And I would say, in your first year to 2 years working with a new supplier, a new customer, setting clear expectations and being able to have transparent conversations around when an expectation was missed, to make sure that you can realign and set it for going forward. So really learning from your mistakes, and making sure that not everything is going to be ironed out in that contract ahead of time. You are going to have some moments where you need to reset boundaries, reset expectations, and just having those open and honest conversations to be able to do that. So that's really one of the key things that you're trying to get at when you're running a relationship 360. Where are we off in our expectations? And I'm sure this model of that I'm about to show you all, of how we communicate with our partners, is likely very similar. So on the buyer side, we tend to have multiple systems, sourcing, contract, risk, payments, multiple systems that often aren't integrated with one another. If you have one system that's integrated and you can get all of your data on your suppliers in one place, I would say that's very rare, and what we should be working towards. But no matter what we do is we take that data from all of these systems, we export it into an Excel file, and then we share it with our supplier. And we're spending about $16 billion annually on these type of systems, and it's going to double over the next 6 to 8 years. So we're spending a lot of money on these systems, and then we are exporting that data into a spreadsheet, and we are sharing it with our supplier, who is doing the exact same thing on their side. So they have spent even more money on their systems, and are still exporting that data and cleaning it up so that they can send it to their counterpart on the buy side. So as you can see in the middle, this is where we live in relationship management. We live in a place of emails, Excel files. There tend to be not up to date, because as soon as you export it from a system, it is out of date. And they tend to be changed by people. And so you never really know what page you should be on. And in remote working, this has gotten even more reliant. This is what we've been relying on even more, because we aren't doing as many in-person meetings. We aren't stopping by an account and saying hello, or having phone calls nearly as much as we were in it before. So we're living in a world of email and spreadsheets, and it is leading to a host of issues. I would say time-consuming data consolidation, to the point of a lot of people on the buy side just don't even have the bandwidth to do it. They don't have the manpower to combine all of the spreadsheets that are needed. So we heavily rely on our suppliers. And even if we do have the time to build those spreadsheets, since it's coming from a real-time data system and being exported into Excel, the information is inconsistent when you get together with your counterpart to say, here's what we're buying, here's what's been delivered. It oftentimes is, you're just not on the same page, and you waste a lot of the conversation talking about how the data is wrong, instead of figuring out how to improve the relationship. Planning and forecasting, it's a mess right now to begin with. We are tripling lead times that it takes to get a product or service delivered. We are having so much delay in this area. Plus, we don't have the right tools for planning and forecasting that are up to date. So a lot of us are just spending all of our effort right now in supply chain trying to figure out when something is going to be delivered. There's no time for innovation. With all of the mess that there is right now, taking time out to figure out how to do a new product or a new innovation for some type of operational efficiency, it's just not happening. We're all just currently trying to get the trains to run on time. When you have that much data that is confusing and inconsistent, it's really difficult to make decisions fast. So that's slowing down even more than usual. And it's leading to a very negative working environment. One of the things I really would like to see change in the world of supplier relationship management, or relationship management in general, is the idea that you are on a team. Those people that are maybe not working with you at your company should still be considered teammates. And you will still have problems if you lose some of those teammates due to a negative working environment. I know myself, there are account managers that I have worked with that would just be irreplaceable for an account, especially because a lot of the data and information that we need is stored in people's brains, because we don't have a centralized place to store data and information. So when you lose people on your partnership team, it heavily affects the partnership. And figuring out how to make it easier for people that are in that relationship to be successful is huge. So there are a lot of reasons to be able to do a deep dive into what's working and what's not working in a relationship. And a relationship 360 is an easy tool to be able to use to make that happen. And to put more fuel to the fire and to talk more about these partnerships, top priorities for CPOs in 2021, number one is operational efficiency. And there's no way to improve operational efficiency without improving it within your supplier relationships. So there's only so much you can do internally to make an effect if your supplier relationships are not working optimally. So this to me is one of the biggest places to start to help CPOs be able to achieve some of their goals. And then the rest of this list that are priorities for CPOs, cost reduction, digital transformation, innovation, all of that comes out of supplier partnerships as well. So instead of thinking about how do we make these massive changes across the board, maybe try to figure out how do you improve operational efficiencies with your top suppliers. And that might actually get you further along, and you might be able to implement those changes faster. And if you take away one thing personally in any of your relationships or professionally in any of the accounts and partnerships that you're managing, two-sided relationships cannot be improved with one-sided feedback. So if you would think about any of your personal relationships that might need a boost, only giving your personal feedback about what needs to be improved would obviously never work. So a lot of companies are only either asking their customers, what do you think of us? Or suppliers or buyers only asking internally, what do we think of this customer? We're not doing a 360 look at what is it like to work with us as a buyer, and are there any things that we could improve that might help the relationship? So this is the only takeaway today. I hope that you guys take this. Two-sided relationships cannot be improved with one-sided feedback. So really focusing on that 360 is going to be key to driving improvement. So how to run a successful 360? So I've done a lot of these over the years. I have designed multiple of these, and these are some of the things that as you are designing your own 360 that you should think about. Not rocket science, and it's easy to develop these 360s and deploy them. So it's a tool that you probably already have capabilities to be able to run with some sort of survey or data collection tool. Odds are your company has already purchased it either on the customer side to be able to get feedback. So really easy to put one of these together. So one of the things to think about is what do you actually want to evaluate? And this should be in direct alignment with either your company goals or the goals for that specific relationship. And things that are easy to be able to have stakeholders actually grade. So these are some of the areas that I tend to build 360s off of in relationships: contract performance, innovation, house communication, planning, forecasting. So these are some of the core areas that I tend to ask questions about in order to evaluate a relationship. But this is not an exhaustive list, and there could be more that you wanted to add, but just make sure that it makes sense to evaluate from both sides. Focus on the gaps, not the score. So I'll be able to show you this in a data example, but it's key to not think about where is the average score for these things. It's really about how do I take a look at the data of how the customer rates the supplier and the supplier rates the customer to understand where we're not on the same page in certain of these relationship activities. Prioritize what people want to improve. This one I have, when I was first running 360s, I did not do, and now I never leave it off, because it is not enough just to understand how the relationship is doing in certain criteria, but what do your people have an appetite to actually change? And I spent wasted hours trying to fix things that people honestly didn't have any buy-in to actually change. And I would say the number one culprit around this is anything around innovation. So I have seen innovation across industries score low time and time again. Before I started asking the question, is this a priority to be changed? We would waste a lot of time and energy on building these innovation plans that would never be implemented because people just didn't have time to actually work towards innovation strategy. So not only understanding how the relationship is doing, but what do your people actually want to put time and energy into improving? So making sure that you ask both of those questions. Also, driving engagement throughout the organization. So you want to pick people that participate in a 360 that are executives, but also people that work with this partner on a daily basis. One of the key things to look at is, does the executive view of the relationship match what the people that are working with them on a daily basis looks like? And we tend to see people either be too rosy on the executive side or too negative. And that to me shows a misalignment on how things are being communicated internally. And so you really want to make sure that your executives have the right picture of what's happening in this relationship. Or anybody that is involved in negotiation that might not be involved in day-to-day. If they don't know what's happening real time in that relationship, they might be negotiating the wrong things for the relationship going forward as you look to renew. And this is one that I would just say as like a forewarning. NPS scores, they don't really work in this type of operational improvement tool. An NPS score, for anybody that doesn't know, it's typically used for consumer products. And the question is like, how likely are you to recommend, let's say, an iPhone to someone else? And that works really well for consumer products because it's more binary to think about, does this phone work for me and do everything I need? Then does this complex relationship of products and services across multiple people, multiple regions, is this something that I would recommend to a friend or another colleague? And the thing is it's too complex of a relationship to be answered with that question. And oftentimes I've had suppliers request that we add this to a 360, and it doesn't really give you any insights that you need to drive improvement. It's a score that oftentimes suppliers are able to take back to their executive team and be able to say, this is how our NPS score is with this customer. But it's really not the right place for a relationship 360. And then who to run a relationship 360 with. It's probably not going to be a shock to a lot of you, but you want to look at your strategic relationships. And in order to evaluate them, you've probably done a supplier segmentation. If you haven't, key things that you're going to want to look for in what makes a strategic supplier that you run a 360 with is, how dependent are you on this relationship for your own company to be successful? And taking a look at how high things like mutual value, risk, and competitive advantage are with this relationship. So it's typically the suppliers you're often spending the most money with. It's not necessarily always that. We have seen a lot of strategic relationships with either an innovative technology or innovative partner that's coming up with new products and ideas that might not be the greatest spend in your company, but is highly needed in order to be successful. So the greatest ROIs for doing these 360s are going to be with those strategic relationships. I would recommend things like scorecards or any sort of like KPI performance information. That type works for that next level down where you are looking to just really drive performance with your suppliers, and you don't necessarily need to be driving innovation, building new products, expanding into new areas for your business. So using the right tool on the right relationship is also key. And then what does a supplier 360 look like? There are so many different ways that you can show this data. I have seen spider graphs. I have seen multiple different types of charts. This is the way that I like to portray the data because I like to be able to not only see how the averages for the supplier and customer, but also each of these individual dots is a person actually responding to those questions. And I like to be able to understand not only what are the averages for each of the company, but also how aligned are we internal on these key areas of relationship activities? Because a lot of times you actually need to start with your own people and being able to understand what's happening in this relationship and how do you improve it. So I talked about this earlier on what makes a 360 successful. And I highlighted in this first one, it's less about the scores being good or bad and more about the fact that the scores are very different here. And so you're not on the same page around performance per se. So there's probably unclear expectations around the KPIs or around how the KPIs are scored that's causing such a great disparity between these two. Also, like I mentioned, being able to understand outliers on your team or on your partner's team to say, okay, we're scoring really well in this area, but we have one person that's scoring it really low. We need to dive in to see like what's happening here in this relationship, and could there be something in operational improvement that we could make that would help not only this person on our team, but also the relationship. Or it could be somebody that is very negatively impacting the relationship if they're consistently scoring it low. So you need to be able to understand, is this person detracting from the team and causing more issues as well. So it really helps you to get this type of data when you're able to lay it out like this. And then another recommendation, so not only looking at how do we score each other in these relationship activities, but once again, talking about priorities. What are the priorities for each side on areas that they'd like to focus on to improve? Because being able to understand what people will actually put their time and energy towards will get you more things done than just focusing on where the scores are low, and people might not actually have any incentive to change or to put any energy towards that. So take a look, not only how are they scoring, but what do people have time and energy in order to fix? So the key is not just to collect this data, just to collect it. So you want to actually be able to put together an actionable program afterwards. I highly recommend, if you haven't done with your strategic suppliers a joint account plan, that to me is another tool that I can also walk you all through at some point that'll help make these relationships more successful. So in your joint account plan, it's typically the goals that you're setting, any sort of projects that you're looking to improve with that supplier. And these are where you would store your actionable takeaways. So talking about innovation, one of the things that I've discovered in the past with past 360s is that executives want innovation, but there's currently no incentive programs for anybody within the relationship to actually step out and look for innovation or to actually implement any new innovation. So one of the actions taken was to change the incentive structure so that people were actually wanting and prioritizing innovation. And what ended up happening and was 2 new product ideas that were greenlit from that supplier. So what you're going to want to track is, what is the issue uncovered? And then how do we take action towards it, and what are the results? And if you are constantly collecting some of this information, you're then able to show at the end of the year, sometimes at the end of 3 to 5 years, depending on how long some of these take to implement, what the impact was, so that you're able to show that you've been able to make improvements, and that's extremely helpful. Another one that we've seen is planning. So a lot of people, because their systems are so complex, all they want to do is they want to get a PO out. They just want to send a PO and they'll make the changes afterwards, but they want just that PO approved so they can start getting things working with their supplier. One of the things that I've seen with companies that do this is that you have a lot of change orders after the PO that are done via email. And so it's not tracked anywhere in any system, but the customer and supplier are still looking to try to figure out how do we get what we need, even though that the change order is happening so much. So one of the things we were able to uncover for this company was that there was an average of 8 change orders per PO, which is a lot. So they had to implement a new waterfall process system that might have had the PO dollar amount approved up front, but the actual process of approving the exact materials that were needed and the time for that were approved later on in the process. And so they actually ended up dropping the number of change orders to about 2 in the first year. And another one that we found, looking for cost reduction on both sides, working with a company that was partnering with an engineering supplier to help them with drawings for some of their materials that they needed. And one of the things that they realized was they were constantly bringing up the drawings from scratch instead of having a database of drawings then as a jumping off point, and being able to save time and energy with that. So they actually found a 20% reduction in engineering cost that they split between both of those companies so that they could share in that savings once they figured out a new way to be able to work together to do that process. That also made it a lot faster too, because their engineers weren't spending so much time drawing things from scratch instead of using a database. So I always say with 360s, I never know going in what the issues that are going to be uncovered. I always have an idea, and I don't have an exact crystal ball into what is going to be going wrong, but there tends to always be something that is worth taking time out to improve. Some of it will be short-term, some of it will be long-term projects, but I have yet to do a 360 where I haven't uncovered something that was staring everybody in the face, but they just didn't have the data collected centrally in order to say, aha, like, look, this is happening throughout the company. We need to do something in order to drive results, instead of just all living with no data and no information and hoping that there's going to be change. So, like I said, 360s, I always find something interesting. It's tough to know going in ahead of time. Even if you have two suppliers that are providing the same product or service, you tend to find both similar issues as well as very specific issues in a relationship. So it's worth doing for your top strategic suppliers to be able to help you run more efficiently together. So the goal of the 360 is to improve efficiency and profitability for both sides. It's not just about you improving for your side. It's a win if you can improve it for both sides. That's truly the point of the 360 and why you have two-way feedback in order to make it happen. And so 360s, you can run them on your own. They're easy to do. This is what you need to do to be able to run them. Designing your own survey is key. There's probably a lot of examples out there that you can use. For everybody that's on this call, and I think Kathy's sending it out to the other ISM members, if you'd like to test out what it's like to do a 360, I have one set up for you so that you can use it. So Kathy will be sending out a link afterwards that allows you to take a 360 about a supplier or customer that you'd like to have improvements with. And in order to do this, obviously pick the partner that you'd like to review with. Ideally, you're looking for 4 internal stakeholders on your team and 4 stakeholders on your partner's team to be able to send the survey out to. And then schedule some time to get together to review it. If you aren't sure that you want to share the information, which I highly recommend being transparent with your partner, but if you feel like that first round, you want to see how the data comes in, and then discuss whether or not you want to share it with them. I've had people do that before, but hopefully at some point you are willing to share the two-way feedback with your partner so that you can figure out how to make improvements. Once again, it's tough to actually have anything be successful if you can't have an open, honest conversation and the data to back it up. And so if you want to run one with us, to test it out to see if 360s are something that you want to use for your company, I can help you pick out which supplier to run it with. If you don't off the top of your head know who would be a good one to have the 360 completed with. The survey is already built for you all. You just have to send it out and take it. On average, it takes between 4 and 5 minutes for an individual to complete. So it's a quick survey. And it's really easy to be able to use. And then we will produce a very high level report and also send you the data if you want to dig into it further, create your own charts. Maybe you have a data person on your team and you can slice and dice the data any way that you like, but we'll show you how we do our top level executive summaries and put it into a PowerPoint presentation for you so that you're able to use it and present it back to either your internal team or to both your internal and external partner. Key tips for success, we've gone through these, but just to reiterate, choose strategic partners, choose stakeholders at variety of levels within your organization, and use this first 360 as a jumping off point for improvement. So it's not about anybody doing this or that wrong. It's really more about how do we find ways to improve together, and a tool in order to, if you do it annually, or sometimes people even do it quarterly, see how you're actually moving the needle in the relationship. So happy to show any of you all that are interested in testing out a 360, our philosophy around how to run them. But also you are able to run them yourself as well. And I would highly recommend them going forward for your relationships at that top level. And then Kathy, I can open it up for questions. Will the questions just come through on the Q&A?
It's on the Q&A in the chat, but
Okay.
I do have a question. There is a question from David. He would be interested in seeing effective governance models from your experience.
Yeah, so I've done a lot of consulting work around this on what is the right governance model based on supplier segmentation. And then also, I would say in the best laid plans of governance models, you still have to tweak it based on what people are willing to do in that relationship. So oftentimes we build programs that are in an ideal world of, let's say, this is how you should work with that strategic supplier, or this is how you should work with that transactional supplier. And but there should always be room for flexibility, especially within those strategic partners, around, you know, what type of governance structure that you're able to use. But David, I'd be happy to do either send you some information or do a side call that talks about supplier governance strategies. And it's definitely probably a whole nother presentation to talk through.
Oh, thank you. A couple of questions. Everybody wants to know, can they get a copy of the slides? If you send them to me, I can forward them out.
Absolutely. Yes, I'll send them. I'll send them to Kathy to forward out.
Okay, great. Oh, this was fantastic. Thank you so much. This is such an interesting topic, and I'm so glad we were able to bring it to all of our members and all of our guests that are joining us today. At this point, I'd like to say thank you for speaking today, Molly. It was, as I said, a very great and different program. And I would like to mention to everybody, yes, you will get a copy of the recording. Once it downloads, I will be sending out the recording, your continuing education points, and also we're going to be sending out a PDF from Molly, and then I will also send out that link as well. So you will be getting some information later today as soon as everything downloads to our site. So I just like to do a couple of closing announcements. Next week, our programs, as you know, we run so many programs. Next week, our program will be The Voice of Supply Chain with Sam Gupta, and he's going to be on September 22nd. We're also running a panel discussion on what is your spare part strategies on September 23rd. So if you're interested in those programs, please register for those. At this time, I'd like to close the program out. And Molly, if you have any other remarks before we close?
No, just thank you all so much. And within the slide deck that we'll be sending out, there is a way to book time to meet with me. So if you guys have any questions on how to actually run these, or doing a free one that we're going to have, if you have any questions, just let me know.
Okay, thank you so much. And
Thanks,
the
Kathy.
audience thanks you. They are sending lots of thank yous to you. So this is wonderful. Okay, great. Okay, well, everybody have a wonderful day, and thanks for joining us.